In Europe, agriculture is a special case. National governments have given jurisdiction in agricultural policy and agricultural funding to a centrally organised European organisation. The Common Agricultural Policy was introduced in 1962 with the aims of increasing production, maintaining living standards for rural communities, stabilising markets, ensuring supplies, and maintaining reasonable consumer prices. What does that mean today in numbers? 28 member countries of the EU, population of 500 million, an annual fund of 58 billion euros each and every year funding agriculture in Europe. That's equivalent to €2 per person per week that every European citizen is paying to fund agriculture. Relevant to us because our agreement with the European Union is that we have free trade access, so we can export our goods into Europe as we wish, but the island is fiscally independent from Europe. So Jersey farmers have not been able to avail themselves of the Common Agricultural Policy. In its place, we've had our own agricultural policy and our own agricultural support. This is explained by Colin Powell, who for many years was economic advisor to the island and helped the negotiations that took place when we joined, or when the UK joined the European Union. At the time, he had to say, the assistance offered to the agricultural community by competitor countries has in some way to be replicated by the Jersey authorities. And the greater the problems faced by the agricultural community maintaining satisfactory income levels, the greater the assistance needed. Local industry would be unable to compete with European products if Jersey granted less than the Common Agricultural Policy levels of support. In retrospect, this was written 30, 40 years ago, the statements have proved correct. And this graph shows a picture over the last 40 years of Jersey agriculture, crop production. I'll leave the comments of the dairy industry to our expert who will be speaking after me. So what we have here is representation graphically taken at 5-year intervals of the gross value of agricultural arable crops output from the island. These have been adjusted to take inflation into account. So back in 1974, and even in fact as far as 1989, 1990, the agricultural arable output for export crops was worth about £100 million a year. So for example, we had a flour crop worth 16 million in today's terms in 1974. We had a Calabrese industry worth nearly £6 million in 1989, a cauliflower industry worth £15 million, £17 million in 1984, courgette industry worth nearly £7 million in 89, a tomato industry worth nearly £26 million in 79. The value of those industries today combined, not much more than £2 million, 2.5 million. The potato industry, which is what we now rely on, you can see further along 2014, that's what's left, is now worth £30 million a year. At its peak, it was nearly 50 million. So when I'm reading that the arable sector remains relatively buoyant, I'm wondering relative to what? Because by my reckoning, the crops are now only worth 1/3 of what they were historically. We had 6 major export crops over that period, we now only have 1. Doesn't seem that buoyant. Perhaps this is part of the answer. States of Jersey agricultural budget, the amount of money which our government used to fund agricultural support on the island. Again, figures adjusted for inflation. Back in 1983, just under £12 million. 1993 it had increased just under 16 million. 2001, still 12 million. And then a turning point. The gradual reduction in our budget, the budget used to support agriculture, to the level at which it is today, around £2 million mark. So a significant change, and a significant change that we need to acknowledge. The declaration that levels of subsidy are at subsidy is at levels that allows Jersey farmers and producers to remain competitive is not correct. That's the reason why we only have now 1 export crop instead of 6 that we had previously. Here's the figures looked at another way. This is the contributions to agriculture per citizen per year in following jurisdictions. And I've included in here Iceland, Switzerland, Norway as examples. They're outside the EU, fairly wealthy communities. In these countries, every person is paying something around the £300 per year. These figures are actually 2007, but they're still roughly in that ballpark today. It's roughly £300 per year. Jersey, in 2007, £34 a year. For those consumers out there in the island who complain about the high price of milk, I'd suggest to them that they're actually quite lucky. They get to choose where they spend their money. In these other jurisdictions, the government take it and use it to bring the price of milk down. That's why the price of milk is cheap elsewhere. But there's also a warning for the industry. The days of subsidised production for Jersey, I feel, are actually numbered. The industry needs to be realistic about what's achievable. This next graph's great, it goes up. The only problem is it's government expenditure. It's what it costs us to run the island. Again, figures adjusted for inflation. 2015, it's over £700 million. Back in 1993, it was just over 400 million. So okay, the population's increased, so we would expect more cost. But actually per head of population, it now costs around about £7,000 per person to run the island. It used to be 5,000.